Okay, so we've already covered the big ideas of constitutional monarchy, and now we're going to shift gears and start thinking about absolute monarchy, but kind of as a midpoint or a halftime in this discussion of the monarchies. I think it's a good idea to talk about mercantilism, because mercantilism is the economic system of the commercial revolution. Commercial. So, as we shifted away from agriculture to this economy based on trade, mercantilism kind of replaces feudalism as the dominant economic system in Europe. And this is something that unites constitutional monarchies and absolute monarchies. So we see both absolute monarchs and constitutional monarchs use this system. So, to start, let's break down some of the rules of mercantilism. This is highlighted in a document. The best, I think, summary of this economic system is written in a document called the Nine Principal Rules of National Economy. And this is I believe it was an essay written by an Austrian guy named Philip von Horneck. I want to say this was written in the 1660s. So I'm not going to have you read this. I might put this up on Canvas for you to read later. But just quickly, I'm going to summarize the rules real fast. First, all the land in your country needs to be used. You have to use all the land in your country for some useful purpose. You have to do all your manufacturing, anything that you're going to make has to be done in your country. So don't outsource anything. All the manufacturing of stuff has to be done in your country. To that end, all people in your country have to work. So no unemployment. Everyone has to work. The next piece is maybe the most important part of mercantilism, in that you keep all the gold and silver you can in your country, and you need to use it as money. So it has to be circulated. No hoarding. The next piece, no imports. don't import stuff, and you only do it as a last resort. So basically, get by on what you have. If you have to import, there are some rules for that. If you have to import stuff, try to barter, not use gold. So try to give them something you have rather than using your gold. The other thing is, if you have to import raw materials that you can manufacture at home. The next rule, try to get your rivals to import your stuff. So try to export as much as possible. And then finally, the last rule, and I'll put it over here so it's kind of even. The last rule is you have no friends. Don't help your allies economically. So don't import anything from them because you feel bad. When it comes to your economy, you have no friends. Or another way you could think about it is, it's not personal, it's just business. So those are the rules of mercantilism. Try to do everything you can do with what you have at home. Everybody has to work. Do as much stuff with what you have. Import only as a last resort, and try to export as much as you can. That's pretty much how mercantilism works. Now, why are we doing this? Well, first, economics is kind of becoming a field of study. So people are starting to look at economics like they start to look at things like literature or theology or the law. It's kind of becoming something you can study. And what early economists thought is that trade is a zero-sum game. This is what early economists thought. This is not true, and most economists, I would say 99% of economists today, say that this is wrong. But early economists said this. A zero-sum game is one in which if we'll say it like this. If you trade something, you lose, and your opponent wins. That's what a zero-sum game is. If you win, your opponent loses. Now, modern economists know that that's not how trade works. Trade builds on itself. Money makes more money. But early economists said that if you traded something, that was a sign of weakness, especially if you're sending away gold. That's a sign of weakness. So if you send away gold, that means that you have lost and your opponents have won. And so this is kind of the early idea of economics. It's going to get replaced actually pretty soon, but at the moment, that's what most economists think. The other thing that's motivating this economic theory of mercantilism is the idea that this is a period of increased conflict. And we're starting to see governments create standing armies. And standing armies are permanent. They're permanent armies that cost a lot of money. They're permanent armies that cost a lot of money. And so the money that comes from trade fuels the military, and what we'll eventually see is that the military helps to fuel trade. So these two things are linked. All of this increased trade is going to fund the military, and the military is going to help fund the trade. It's going to help protect trade routes, force people to accept your imports. These two things are going to go together. One more point we need to make before we look at a couple of examples is that the monarchs, whether they are absolute or constitutional, monarchs need to keep the merchant class and more generally the middle class happy. These are the guys, the merchants and generally the middle class, these are the guys with the money. And the government needs money. So these economic policies are meant to protect the property rights of these rich middle class people and keep them paying taxes. As long as they're happy, they'll keep paying their taxes without complaint. And just so that we're clear, the middle class people are people that are as rich as the nobility, but without the titles and privileges. So they're as rich as the nobles, but they don't have the fancy titles or the privileges. And so we've got to keep these people happy because these are the people with the money and these are the people that are paying taxes. So let's look at how this is done in practice. So we're going to look at two examples, one from an absolute monarchy and one from a constitutional monarchy. So here are two methods of how we do mercantilism. The first one we're going to look at is from France. So we're going to call this one Tariffs and Incentives. So this is, everybody does this, but we're going to look at this in France. So the guy that is notable here, the guy that we need to know, is Louis XIV's finance minister, the guy in charge of the books. His name, Jean-Baptiste Colbert. So what he's going to do is he's going to increase a bunch of taxes and fees on foreign goods. So it's going to be more expensive for foreign ships to dock in French ports. So they're going to go elsewhere. We don't want your stuff. Don't try to export your stuff to us. We don't want it. He's also going to give money to French shipbuilders to build ships in France rather than buying them abroad. So the French were not known as shipbuilders, but Colbert is going to give money to French shipbuilders to start building up the French shipbuilding industry. Same thing for luxury goods. Like jewelry or glassware. So it used to be that the French would buy jewelry from other countries, or they would buy glassware from other countries. What Colbert is doing is he's going to hire people from other countries to come to France and start up jewelry businesses or glassware factories. So he's going to hire foreign artisans to come to France and start businesses there. Because remember, the point of mercantilism is to try to do as much as you can in your country. So he's going to have French shipbuilders make ships. He wants to have French people buy French luxury goods. So don't buy foreign jewelry. Buy this new French jewelry that we are going to start creating, because we're going to bring in foreign jewelry makers and foreign glass makers. So don't buy that foreign stuff. Buy this stuff in France, made by French people. Another way that we might see this put into practice are through colonial laws. And this is a big English thing. So here is a constitutional monarchy doing the same thing. So maybe the most famous or infamous, depending on how you want to look at this, example of this are the Navigation Acts. And these were first passed in 1651. And what they did is they said that foreign ships were not allowed to dock or trade with England or their colonies. So only English ships can do this. Eventually, the English are also going to say that their colonists can't trade with anyone other than with England. This is going to be a big problem for the English colonists. The colonists will be upset, and that will eventually be one of the reasons for the American Revolution, which we will cover later. It should also be noted that a lot of these policies that the English are doing are aimed at the Dutch, their biggest trade rival. So the Dutch were trying to trade with the English colonies, but the Navigation Acts were meant to cut the Dutch out of this trade. So most of this stuff was directed at the Dutch. Now, eventually, these ideas will be replaced by ideas of free trade. The idea that trading isn't a zero-sum game, that trade is something that builds on itself. The more trade you do leads to more trade and more money. The guy that is usually associated with this shift is Adam Smith, who wrote a very influential book called The Wealth of Nations, which sounds mercantilist, but it's not. He's actually going to refute a lot of what the mercantilists are saying. But we'll cover more stuff about Adam Smith in videos on the Enlightenment. So he's going to be one of the important Enlightenment figures we talk about in our next big unit after we talk about the monarchs. It also probably stands to note that today, like in the modern day, a lot of mercantilist ideas seem to be growing in popularity. I'm not exactly sure what that means or why we're seeing it, but it does seem like a lot of these ideas that von Hornig brought up at the beginning of this video seem to be coming back, especially the ideas of only do manufacturing in your own country, alienate your allies, everything should be done at home. Those ideas seem to be making a comeback. And it's not exactly clear why, but we are seeing these ideas start to kind of come back into the political sphere. All right, so I'm going to stop there. In our next video, we're going to start talking about absolute monarchy. Until then, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.